Okay, good morning. It's the 7th of February. We do have one excused absence by a council member, and I do see our county manager now coming in. I thought you were going to be much later. So we're going to go over our interlocal agreement with Camas, which we are much anticipating, I hope, and then we'll continue our council retreat following that presentation. So without further ado, who's going to introduce it?
Council. For the record, I'm Priya Dhanapal, Deputy Public Works Director for Clark County, and joined today by Devin Rostafer, a Clean Water Division Manager, and Steve Wall, Public Works Director for the City of Camas. We are eager and excited to present to you today the draft interlocal agreement between Clark County and the City of Camas, aiming to improve the water quality in the Lacamas watershed and lakes. I want to begin our presentation by showing gratitude. My heartfelt thanks to our County Council for your guidance and support for this vital initiative. Your passion towards improving water quality in Lacamas watershed and lakes is truly commendable and has been a strong driving force to make this happen. I also appreciate your patience and understanding as we navigated through this process. I thank our dedicated Clean Water Division staff, particularly Devin Rostafer, for her outstanding leadership on this initiative. I am also grateful to the City of Camas for the partnership, as well as to the various stakeholders, including Clean Water Commission, involved in this effort. This collaboration is a first step towards formalizing a commitment to doing long-term work in the Lacamas watershed and lakes to enhance water quality for the benefit of the current and future generations of people, fish, and wildlife. Next slide, please. For the presentation today, we will begin with the background information to remind everyone why we are focusing on the Lacamas watershed and why we are today and where we are today, followed by an overview of the first draft of the ILA for work in Lacamas. We will also present the proposed county and Camas work plans for feedback. We're not seeking any next slide, please. We're not seeking any final decisions or approvals today. Instead, our goal is to use this work session to inform Council about the progress County and Camas staff have made to develop a draft ILA and provide an overview of the terms and conditions of the ILA. We are seeking feedback and input from Council that will be incorporated in the final ILA. We also plan to highlight actions that we believe county staff can feasibly get started on this year, and we hope to conclude this work session with time for Q&A, discussions, and thoughts on next steps. Our timeline for finalizing this ILA is to have a final agreed upon ILA signed and ready to begin implementation in early spring, so we have a formal framework to work together before summer of this year when lake treatment is expected to begin. With that overview, I will now transition into some brief background on the Lacamas watershed and lakes. Next slide, please. And there's, I think, one more. As most of you are aware, the Lacamas watershed is on the Washington State's polluted water list, which drives the need for the Department of Ecology to develop a water cleanup plan. Additionally, Lacamas Lake has experienced recurring harmful algal blooms, which led to the City of Camas seeking grant funding to develop a lake management plan to address concerns with lake water quality. Throughout Ecology's watershed planning process and City of Camas's lake management planning effort, Clark County staff have provided consistent input and technical support, recognizing the long-term improvements in water quality requires consistent coordination and partnership from local, state, and federal partners, which all have different roles and responsibilities for water quality. Next slide, please. To help bring all of our stakeholders together, the Clean Water Commission hosted the Lacamas Symposium in October 2023, which was a great success. This forum served as a venue for all partners to provide updates on the current status of science and analysis on watersheds and lakes, and to also focus on a call to action as we move into the next phase of implementation. We want to take this moment to acknowledge that we greatly appreciated our council's attendance at the Lacamas Symposium, and we also wanted to thank Chair Medvedji and the City of Camas's mayor for the remarks of the event. Next slide, please. So now that the symposium is behind us and the Lake Management Plan and Ecology's Watershed Study are close to complete, where are we today? Next slide, please. Today, staff are 100% focused on our need to finalize an ILA between the county and Camas, which will establish how our separate organizations will work together to achieve water quality success. At this time, I will hand it over to Devin to talk through the details of what staff have included in the first draft ILA for county and Camas partnership on Lacamas.
Great. Thank you, Priya, and thank you to Council and also the City of Camas for being here today. For the record, my name is Devin Rostfer. I'm the Clean Water Division Manager, and I'm very excited to be here today to present the details of the first draft ILA, which contains 6 different sections. First, starting with an ILA purpose, followed by a task focused on establishing a joint vision and charter for Clark County and Camas coordination, followed by a call to create a formal technical advisory group for future work, as well as areas where there are opportunities for joint public outreach and agency partnerships, policy initiatives we can work on together, as well as work plans for Clark County and Camas individually, and near and ongoing joint work plans for us to achieve together. And throughout the remainder of this presentation, I will walk through each of these sections in more detail. Next slide. Starting with the ILA purpose. The purpose of this ILA, as we see it, is to set the formal foundation for long-term partnership and a governance structure that defines clear roles and responsibilities to establish a shared vision and policy initiatives for long-term work on Lacamas water quality. This includes establishing clear financial expectations, outlining regulatory authority, and working to establish a mutual shared responsibility between Clark County and Camas to achieve clean water in the Lacamas watershed and lakes. Next slide. One of the first steps that we recommend to take on this vision and to bring it to fruition is to establish a joint vision and charter for how our 2 governments will work together. Through this effort, staff recommend that we start by the chartering process, as well as establishing a clear decision-making process to help us make tough choices and resolve any challenges where our 2 governments may not agree. Additionally, this effort will involve establishing an annual agreed-upon work plan that clarifies expectations for each party to achieve in a calendar year. Next slide. In addition to establishing the vision and charter, the draft ILA also outlines the task to form a technical advisory group with the goal that this group will provide a forum to streamline and formalize communication and to provide technical overview and guidance to help guide implementation. This group will also help establish funding and policy initiatives for us to bring to our respective councils to consider, and will track and monitor effectiveness of implementation efforts. Next slide. Together, we are also recommending that we work on a joint public education and outreach plan, which includes a public participation planning effort that identifies the target audiences and key messages, as well as a timeline and plan for shared public meetings, events, open houses, or stewardship events, as well as shared website or web page to update the public on water quality efforts in Lacamas. Next slide. With these shared resources, some of the main actions we are committed to working on together include building resources for private landowners to support site visits, outreach, and additional technical and financial assistance to address water quality issues. We've also agreed that there's a need to take a joint strategy for the larger pollutant generating facilities in the watershed, such as golf courses and dairies. We are also interested in jointly identifying opportunities for riparian and wetland restoration or land acquisition activities. County and city staff have also agreed that continuing to dedicate our resources to participate in Ecology's watershed planning process is also a priority. Our understanding is that this process will be critical to further identify the priority areas and projects, implementation activities, and cost estimates for implementation, as well as helping establish the implementation timeline, a plan for monitoring effectiveness, and adaptively managing implementation. Next slide. Another important area where we see opportunities to formalize coordination is establishing shared policy initiatives. We recommend this could be through establishing joint legislative priorities, as well as working together on legislative and congressional funding requests as we seek direct appropriations for septic, sewer, stormwater, agriculture, or riparian restoration work, as well as continuing to pursue opportunities to advance work on banning phosphate-based fertilizer use in the county in Camas. Next slide. Other policy initiatives where we see opportunity is coordinating and looking for opportunities to update our local codes and ordinances, as well as reviewing local fees, rates, and permits as potential mechanisms to help fund lake management work into the future. We're also interested in exploring and supporting new partnership opportunities to support implementation programs and working towards solidifying a long-term management framework for watershed and lake health well into the future. Next slide. So now that we've went over the foundational work in the ILA, I'll go into what we're proposing for our county work plan, and then I'll hand it over to Steve to talk about Camas's. So as of now, Clark County, we see 4 major areas where we can commit resources within the Clean Water Division with our current funding levels and staff capacity. This includes continuing to conduct the DNA testing to identify sources of bacteria pollution and whether they're coming from humans, livestock, dogs, horses, or geese, and this can help us target our financial and technical assistance resources appropriately. We're also committed to continuing to monitor in the Lacamas watershed every 5 years to assess the effectiveness of implementation efforts and to measure any improvements in water quality. Clark County Public Health also provides cyanobacteria monitoring and public notification during harmful algal blooms. And finally, we're planning to complete a stormwater inventory of all of our stormwater facilities with the goal to swap out or update all of the stormwater treatment cartridges in public facilities to have the best phosphorus removal technologies possible. In addition to these efforts, I also want to highlight some exciting announcements. We just learned through the Department of Ecology's fiscal year 2025 offer list that we are on the list for 2 new grant funding opportunities, which will have the final answer on in June of this year. So one of the grants is to continue to implement Poop Smart Clark in partnership with Clark Conservation District, targeting the Lacamas watershed for that DNA testing and outreach. We also received funding to begin a new behavior change campaign focused on reducing the use of weed and feed, which is a major source of nutrients and pesticides in watersheds. So this will include efforts to help educate landscape professionals and to help translate materials into different languages to reach multiple people in the landscape industry. Now I'll hand it over to Steve to talk a bit about what Camas is planning to work on.
Great, thank you, Devin. Good morning, Chair Medvedji and councilors. Thank you for letting me join your work session this morning. Steve Wall, Public Works Director for City of Camas, for the record. And before I get started on just these 3 or 4 items on the slide, I do want to mention that the Camas City Council will have a work session on this same topic on February 20th. That meeting starts at 4:30, but all of the materials will be available, and you can also watch that online if you'd like. So similar to the county, Camas has 4 or 5 main things that we've identified here for a draft work plan. One of them is unique to Camas, so I'm not sure if you're aware, but we own the dams that controls the levels of the lakes, and so that's something that has been a question through the years as it relates to water quality, and so we want to dive into that a little bit further. So that'll be part of our efforts here in the near term and moving forward. We also want to continue to develop the final lake treatment plan, so we'll work in coordination with county staff and talk more about what that treatment looks like this summer. We don't have a lot of time. Typically, when they do those treatments that's been recommended in the plan, you want to find the right time between when you still have a lot of water coming through the lake and releasing, basically just after that, so that you can get the treatment down and have it in place for the water that's going to be there for recreation through the summer. So that's going to be some timing that we need to work on, and we are working with our consultant team, and we have been talking with a couple of vendors already on what that might look like. So more to come on that. Long-term monitoring is key. So we have staff working already on just how do we establish a baseline for the lake. We want to monitor upstream in the lake and then also downstream. It's important to do that definitely before we do any treatment or any other kind of activity in the lake to help improve water quality, but that'll be the baseline that we can then use to determine how effective our strategies have been and be able to adapt things moving forward, which really goes into the last item here, gathering more information for the lake management plan. There's really a number of items wrapped into this, but it's mainly to continue that monitoring and, like I said, be adaptive. There's lots of new technology out there. There's lots of different ways that we might be able to treat the water in the lake, in addition to the efforts that we're making in the watershed. And so we want to, again, be adaptive here and make sure that we have good information that'll provide us with a good plan moving forward. So those are the main items. I would also mention we have our stormwater program similar to the county. We are also on a path to inventory and replace a lot of our, actually all of our stormwater filter cartridges in the different treatment areas and make sure that the ones going into the Lacamas watershed have the phosphorus treatment and make sure that they're all working correctly. So those are some of the items that we're working on as well. So that I'll hand it back to Devin.
Great. Thank you, Steve. Appreciate that overview. And I just want to wrap things up by, I won't walk through everything on this slide, but this is really the summary of what we plan to achieve together through this draft interlocal agreement. And for next steps, next slide. To achieve this, in addition to developing annual work plans, staff are recommending that we revisit this interlocal agreement at least every 2 years to make changes if necessary. We're also committed to providing regular updates to our councils and developing a process to document all the implementation efforts annually so we can keep track of our investments and the progress we're making and to help us measure which implementation actions are working. Next slide. In conclusion, I wanted to end today by again thanking everyone for your time and also for your patience and your continued interest and for allowing staff to begin drafting an interlocal agreement for each of our councils to provide feedback on. We recognize that there'll likely be input and ideas and questions today that will require us to work on a second draft before it's final. But we sincerely hope that this is a step in the right direction to help us formalize how the county and Camas work together towards better water quality. At this time, we would love to hear council's impressions, reactions, and any feedback or questions you have.
So I'm going to go ahead and start and just say, perfect. Thank you so much. This is an enormous task for any organization, whether it's Camas or the county. And I do have a few questions and a couple of additional comments. I mean, most of my comments you already covered in the slide, but there are a couple I want to reemphasize. So, Steve, regarding the dam, because there's kind of urban legend about it, I know that the mill passed it to you a couple of years ago, but I've also heard that because it's a dam, that the Corps of Engineers has some jurisdiction over it as well. So where are the requirements coming from that you drain the lake every year to inspect it? And because it is a complicating factor on flushing the lake. It also impacts fish recovery, of which there is none because of the dam. The Lower Columbian Fish Recovery Board has no interest beyond Washougal River because of the dam, although they are very interested in the watershed and they are interested in other fish. So tell me about the dam. I mean, what is impacting what you do with the dam every year?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So in this case, for these dams, based on the size and activity there, they're actually not monitored by the Corps. It's Department of Ecology. It's just a different division within ecology, so it's the Dam Safety Office at Ecology that actually permits the dams for the city in this case. So through that process, we have a few things that we need to do, but the main one that does impact the lakes and the drawdown every year, and that is required that we draw the lake down to inspect the dams. That's primarily the reason that we do that, or that is the reason we draw the lakes down. So we need to get down and inspect the gates and look at the different structural components and make sure that it's still functioning and structurally safe. The other piece of this that comes into play that we have heard from, there hasn't been a lot of discussion in the past, is my understanding, but obviously Department of Fish and Wildlife also has an interest in this activity. So we have 2 or 3 at least kind of competing interests here when you think about the water quality in the lake itself, the structural integrity of the dams and the requirements to inspect them, and then Fish and Wildlife and what that may look like and hold in the future.
Okay, thanks. And that's a great segue to my next comment, which are the stakeholders. All of our lakes are precious throughout the state, and all of our lakes are challenged because of the numerous stakeholders that have underlapping jurisdiction or overlapping. You had on your slide a few of them, but Fish and Wildlife's one. NOAA could be. EPA could be for clean water. RCO, Recreation and Conservation, they contributed heavily to the north shore of Lacamas Lake, besides our park system. And we have all the citizen groups out there as well. So there's a lot of stakeholders that I'm hoping this lake management plan that we ultimately get to for each of our lakes in our county will be the way ahead. So I'm hoping at the state level that they recognize that as well for funding opportunities, as well as to expedite the creation amongst all their state departments of lake management organizations, because we need it. And finally, as to your comments about, the public education, whether it's agriculture or fertilizer use, manure management, we have a great conservation district with a lot of information there. The biggest stakeholders are our human population and our wildlife and our aquatic life. So we really could use the help of the public to educate themselves about the use of fertilizer, overuse of fertilizer, management of domestic and their, other large livestock particularly. There's so many things that go into this, the septic systems, getting people who could be on sewer connected to sewer. So this is an enormous undertaking, and first and foremost, I ask that the public be brought along. So you mentioned a 2-year review of the interlocal. My first impression is, oh my God, no. Let's do it much more often. I mean, we need an update, at least in a quarter or 6 months. Something that's in the public domain that people can follow along and see what we're doing, but also so we can make adjustments and the azimuth checks we need to do. So I would ask that we do it much more frequently than every 2 years. So anyway, great presentation. Let me turn it over to other counselors for questions.
Don't have any questions. I would just say that, maybe we have I agree, a review more often, but I mean, I think the interlocal agreement itself, probably biannual update would be okay. But yeah, I agree. Just keeping it, things lose momentum if you don't bring them up all the time. So appreciate your work and appreciate the collaboration between the county and the city of Camas.
Thank you, Councilor Young, and I think you bring up a good point that the ILA we're suggesting, like the framework at which we work, it would be every 2 years, which I think we could increase the frequency, but those work plans and those updates, those can definitely, that is something I think where those could benefit from more frequent touch points. Right now, we're proposing an annual work plan. If you're suggesting we develop a quarterly or 6-month work plan, I think we're open to increasing that frequency.
So Karen, Michelle, do you have any comments or questions? I did have a residual one. It's one that came up during the first round of the interlocal. What's this going to cost? And I think that kind of scared off Camas a little bit to begin with, and I don't want to scare us off. Do we have any projected costs? I mean, we have 80% of the watershed, so this is going to be a big burden on the county. Do we have any cost estimates?
Sorry, that is a great question. So I do have some appendix slides regarding costs for lake treatment, but as far as costs for watershed implementation, those are level of service options that we're planning to incorporate into our rate study, because currently we don't have allocated funding for dedicated work in the Lacamas watershed. So we're currently developing those cost estimates to bring to you to consider through the rate study process. So we would be happy, if it would be beneficial to give you those cost estimates before we see you again in April, we'd be happy to do that, but that is something we see as happening in conjunction with the rate study.
Okay. And as to, once again, I want to thank the legislature for the earmarks, not only for Vancouver, but Lacamas Lake. And I understood the latest one, that a good portion of that was going to be, it's allocated to Camas. Are you still planning on spending that on the chemical treatment this summer?
Yeah, that's the plan right now, but that is part of the work plan item that you saw, right, of working with the TAG, in this case, right, the Technical Advisory Group, and being able to talk through that and make sure that we're on a good path. So, but yes, to answer your question, the initial treatment this year, that is anticipated to be using the funding from the state for that. And then again, right, I think we need to be adaptive and see how things work this year and have continuing conversations. And if we should have money available for additional treatment or other options as we move into next year as well. So it was a good piece of money from the legislature this time to help.
Super. And Karen, it looks like our sweaters match again almost. Did you have any comments or questions?
We don't plan that, folks. I also had questions on the cost, and I think that will be forthcoming, so that's great. I wondered also if for the public and councils of those who serve in public service, would you please highlight the specific legislative priorities that are under discussion for this session?
Just to clarify, are you asked the question, what legislative priorities are we working on for this session?
Right.
Okay, that is a great question. I don't know if I have the answer for that from Clark County's perspective. Maybe Camas, you could chime in.
It looks like our policy analyst is wondering if he should.
We can invite Jordan up. Here, you take my chair.
Hey, Councilors, Jordan Bogey for the record, Senior Policy Analyst. We don't have specific, so there's no legislation that I'm aware of that we're tracking that it really has a meaningful impact on the watershed right now. I know in the previous cycle, we got a budget proviso, and that's some of the funding that we're using, I think, for Vancouver Lake at the moment and working towards that treatment plan. I would anticipate that in sessions to come, this will be something that we're going to go back to our delegation for future funding. And actually, this is a conversation I wanted to have with the council and maybe later at our retreat when we talk about policy items on an ongoing basis. But I do think this is something where we can engage our legislative delegation early in the process in this year to start to look for future opportunities for funding in 25.
Thank you, Jordan. I couldn't agree with that more. And to highlight, even in the work plan, what some of the things are that we intend to focus on sooner rather than later for next year, I think will be very important so that it comes to the front. So we've got time to work with it and really work it through.
So I want to add to that before you step down. And the city may not have been part of our local legislative delegation meeting. You know, our local legislators care. They are engaged with us. They have asked us, what do you need next? So if you, the sooner you can identify that, even if right now you can identify what we will need, and that's Lake Vancouver as well, and Lacamas Lake, let's make it known right now, because, I mean, the session's not over yet. There's always an opportunity. But if we can identify a specific need right now, they're asking, and we should answer. Thank you for that, Karen. Michelle, did you have a comment or question?
Yes, I did. I just wanted to say thank you to all the stakeholders who participated in the symposium for Lacamas Lake. It was very, very informative. And actually, I made some really good contacts with ecology for some issues that were happening in my district. So I appreciate that. It's always good to network with people. Devin, I think updates more often would be good, because I know there's a couple of constituents that were at the symposium that said they kind of felt in the dark about what the status was, like what's happening with Lacamas Lake and the remediation and the different things associated with that. Although I think Chair Medvegy would have a better idea of how often that would occur, because that's in his district and he's more familiar with what's going on.
Thank you for that comment. And one of the things I also heard at the symposium is, okay, what happens next? And I think we all recognize that there is an expectation that we'll take action and that we'll communicate about what that action is. And that is something I'm personally and professionally committed to, as well as making sure we better utilize our Clean Water Commission also as a great conduit to make sure we're getting those updates out, and also to council and to the public. So thank you for bringing that to my attention.
Is there anything you need from us today? I think you've gotten a very generally positive response from us. And as to your last comment, I mean, obviously the chemical treatment, one of those stated goals is we need to reduce or eliminate the algae blooms for purposes of aesthetics, but health. I mean, we have sick pets, sick people, and everyone's told stay out of the lake for too much of the recreational year. And whatever we can do on the dam, because that's always, well, when the lake gets drained, and then that really curtails a lot of activity. But if it can have a dramatic positive impact on the health of the water body by flushing in a different way, I mean, those are two positive steps right away, besides everything else you've enumerated. But what do you need from us? What do you need any direction today?
I would say that the direction that I heard is a desire for more frequent updates and work planning. So that is something that we heard loud and clear, and we'll make sure that we look at the ILA and address that before we bring a final version back to you. So the next step would be Camas having their work session with council to receive their input, and we can bring you updates if there is important information that you should be aware of. And then the next step will be that you'll see a draft final ILA for us to approve to begin implementation. And then beginning to help us identify those legislative priorities, we can come up with, it sounds like you're going to have some time today to discuss that, but we'll be really wanting to get your approval and buy-in to anything that we dedicate resources to as staff. My final comment would be just also recognizing the connection between this work and our rate study work. They're very much connected, and we want to make sure that our division has resources to be able to continue this work.
So you have my thumbs up for sure. How about the rest of the council? I know Sue's out today. Looks universal. Thank you so much. And at any point, if the city starts to ask questions or balk, please let us know so we can have additional conversations with your leadership. If there's nothing further, we'll go ahead and adjourn this meeting. Thanks again. Great work on behalf of both cities in the county.
Thank you, Councilor.
All right, so we're going to roll right into the. Oh, sorry. Thank you.